Good evening to everyone on social media. Today is May 25th, 2019. I want to take a moment to address the topic of illegal immigration and why it should matter. I'm going to read one of the more popular Facebook posts that one of my friends sent me that does not care and does not believe illegal immigration does matter to him. And then I'm going to address a couple of points in the statement that they make. Without further ado, I'll begin and read the post. It says, "Can I tell you a secret? I don't care if there are undocumented immigrants in this country. I think it's a non-issue. Without social security numbers, they're not getting the welfare people claim they're getting. The vast majority of them are normal people trying to live a better life. This whole wall deport the illegal bullshit is just one of the 1% convincing the working poor to blame a subset of the working poor for the fact that they are all poor, instead of realizing they are poor due to the vast income inequality and resource price inflation in combination with wage stagnation. The existence of another poor person is not why you are poor. It's because the people who control everything refuse to increase your wages." Okay, with that being said, let's deal with illegal immigration. If you watch the news, you will find, and if you've done a little bit of research, you'll find that the people coming across a border are paying coyotes to smuggle them across. This is from reports $7,000 to $10,000 a head. That is a person. These coyotes are linked with drug cartels, organized crime, and with that being said, we're going to take a look at the $7,000 to $10,000 a head. The average American, with their increased wage per hour, cannot lay their hands on $7,000 to $10,000. So, if we can't, how is it that someone who comes from a substantially less dollar per hour ratio or wage environment has $7,000 to $10,000? The fact of the matter is they're not. Someone's paying their way $7,000 to $10,000 to have them smuggled into this country. With that being said, you've heard the terms human trafficking, sex trafficking, debt bondage, etc. Well, that's exactly what's happening. And these coyotes who are entangled with the drug cartels and in illegal activities or engaged with the gangs, they're human traffickers. And, once these individuals get over here, they've got to pay that debt off. And many of them, according to reports, are sexually exploited. And so you've got gang members who are being smuggled in. You've got terrorists who are smuggled in. This is a fact. You've got people who are undereducated and illiterate. Many of them, the majority, don't have a high school diploma. They can't read and write in their own language, and they can't read and write in English. On top of that, you have people who are bringing in contagious diseases that were formerly pretty much non-existent: measles, untreatable forms of tuberculosis with antibiotics, etc. Now, with that being said, let's address the welfare area. All of these caravans that have been taking place have not been taking place because a group of people decide they want to come over here. Make no mistake about it, they are designed and they are well funded and they are organized, and they are for a purpose: to come over here and come into America and dilute the American society and population, and to change society and population as a whole. But when someone comes over here and they claim asylum or refugee status, and they obtain refugee or asylum status, this in turn opens all of America's benefits and assistance to them. So when someone tells you that because they haven't got social security numbers or this, that, they don't get nothing, that's just not a fact. That's not a fact at all. The Fact is that when you get refugee status or asylum status, you have a multitude of assistance that is opened up to you in America. Okay, with that, you also have people who are turned away or who might not get that. They're released into America, and so this can drive up crime, among other things. Not saying that everyone is, but you've got to look at what's happening and what's being done. With that being said, this individual in here talks about build the wall, bull crap. That this whole build the wall is propagated by 1% stirring up the poor. Well, that's just not a fact at all. But if our congressmen and senators and state and local legislators and the federal legislators really cared about the problem and just getting rid of the problem of illegal immigration, they would start cracking down on these abusive, totalitarian contractors that use and abuse these people. And what I mean by use and abuse is work them for substandard wages, etc. And so anyone who's an American contractor who engages in the hire and exploitation of illegal labor, such as coming across our southern border, then first step is to fine them heavily, the first offense. The second offense is a fine and jail time, and the third offense, they lose their right to ever own a business in America again. Secondly, a lot of people don't understand that the contractors and so on that use these people hire them through third-party temp organizations. This way they can remain their hands clean. The temp organizations tell the contractor, they check out, etc. And the temp organizations are paid, then they pay their employees. Now, one of my skill sets happens to be that of a journeyman carpenter. And it's been my experience in watching as illegal labor takes and displaces the American worker and destroys the American craftsmen and trades of plumbing, electrical, etc. on the commercial, industrial, and residential market. This is my following observations. One of the last major projects I worked on was the Millen Roads Hilton Gardens Inn. There were 2 other projects aside from ours, which made up a total of 3 that were in the stages of beginning and 1 wrapping up. One of those was the federal courts building. Why, in the midst of renovating the Millen Roads Hilton Gardens Inn, there was an immigration raid on the almost complete federal courthouse off of Broad Street. And within 15 minutes of that raid reaching the job site next to ours and Millen Roads Hilton Gardens Inn, our job site, the Millen Roads Hilton Gardens Inn, which had roughly, I'd say 400 to 450 employees, was down to 75, give or take a little more or less, because everyone who was illegal fled work. They didn't want to be there because they were afraid of getting caught up in the raid. So the next area we're going to address is people say, these immigrants are coming over here, these illegals are doing jobs Americans won't do. But let me tell you that mixed within these illegal immigrants are gang members. Inside the Millen Roads Hilton Gardens Inn during its construction, and my knowledge of gangs at the time, as well as my further knowledge and understanding now, we were or had heavily MS-13 gang members that were working there, that had their markings upon the drywall and everything else, which was very prevalent on just about every floor. Now, when I talk about displacing the American worker and destroying whole generations of craftsmen, I mean exactly that. When you take and pay cheap labor, you are, in essence, getting rid. You'll have 1 or 2 Americans that are running crews of anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15. And the illegal immigration has taken control of the majority of residential, commercial, and industrial construction. They are hired through third-party temp organizations. And according to what I have been told from people on construction sites when I was in the construction industry before I went into law enforcement, they do not make time and a half wages. And I've seen the working conditions that they work in or are subject to. And at the end of the day, human trafficking, debt bondage is nothing more than slavery. So if you don't think that slavery is an issue, that illegal immigration is an issue, then you need to understand the problem, because what you have coming across the border is nothing more than slaves who are slaves to the coyotes, who are attached to the drug cartels and illegal activity, and gangs to boot on top of that, which is basically what drug cartels are, with their gang members in the upper echelon and how the power system ranks. When you want to deal with income inequality, a lot of people, and I'll say the majority of Americans, are not taught and do not have a proper understanding of the Constitution. They don't have a proper understanding of what was before what our current system became. To tell you about that, we never had a Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, I believe, was established in 1913. It has absolutely nothing to do with the federal government. It is controlled by Class A stockholders, and when the president appoints someone as chairman or head of the Federal Reserve, the president really isn't appointing anyone because he has no control over them. He is giving a list, according to my understanding, of roughly 7 persons from which to choose, and that list is generated by those Class A stockholders of the Federal Reserve, which are the rich and the powerful. They control how much money is in the market. They can restrict the flow of money or release the flow of money into the market. It is one of the things that our founding father Thomas Jefferson warned us of. It is an entity that controls our economy and should be abolished. Now, let's talk about the way prior to 1913, how our congressmen and senators were elected. And let's talk about the federal government and the IRS and their ability to tax the American people. Prior to 1913, when the 16th Amendment was ratified, the states only had the power to tax the people. The federal government had to come to the states for its operating budget, but now it's the other way around. We have states pandering to the federal government in order to get money to operate with. We need to reverse this. The 16th Amendment needs to be abolished. We need to bring the federal government and rein them back into control, and these politicians who have sold out the American people, which is the vast majority, in my opinion, of Republicans and Democrats. Secondly, the 17th Amendment. Many people do not realize that prior to the 17th Amendment, which April 8th of 1913 was passed, your congressmen and your senators were selected by your state legislatures, if my understanding of history is correct, and they could be pulled at a moment's notice if they were not reflecting and doing the will of the people. So, after the 17th Amendment, that allowed the election of your congressmen and senators by the people directly. So, we need to get rid of the 17th Amendment, because if the people take and exercise their voting rights with their state and local government officials, and then we're able to apply pressure on them when they appoint our senators and congressmen, that if they're not reflecting the will of the American people that place their state representatives, both their state representatives are subject not to be reelected, and the senator and congressman is pulled and replaced with someone who is willing, therefore, to represent the American people as put into office to do. So again, we need to abolish the Federal Reserve. We need to get rid of the 16th and 17th Amendment and return it back to what our Constitution was in its originality. So a lot of people say, you know, gangs, terrorists, you're exaggerating. Well, let me tell you a little bit about gangs. Used to be, you know, you're recruited into gangs, this, that, and the other, but now mom and dad are both gang members. And we're going to use MS-13 as an example because MS-13 is in the headlines, which is a very brutal gang coming across our southern border. So mom and dad are gang members. Mom and dad have a son. The son goes to a local school. The son sees not only that he's now a gang member in MS-13 being born into the lifestyle, but he sees a particular young lady he likes. He has his friend videotape him and the young lady in an explicit situation, then blackmails and threatens the woman, the young girl, and threatens to do harm to her family. And then next thing you know, the child is sex trafficked, pimped out to his buddies and other gang members and anyone who can pay the price. And mom and dad don't know what's going on, or our grades have dropped, but this is the underlying factor. And yes, this does happen in America, but your media does not report this to you. The vast majority of crimes are not reported. You only get the highlights of what they deem to make the news, but this is happening. I hope that everyone watches this video. If you like it, share it. I encourage you to research human trafficking, sex trafficking, slavery in America, debt bondage, because that's exactly what the whole illegal immigration deal is. Aside from taking and diluting the American population and voting bloc to where they can change society as a whole. Remember that over in California and other localities, I want to say New York as well, but they want to give illegals the right to vote and representation in the state and local elections. And with that being said, these are people who are coming over here who are vastly illiterate. They do not cannot read and write our language, but they want to use them, tell them who to vote for, and they do not care for our Constitution and our laws, and they don't understand our Constitution and our laws, and therefore it stands at a point to change society and American society as we know it. This is one of the tools that the globalists are using to work to change American society. And I encourage you to share this video, like it, because we need to stand up, we need to speak out while we still have a country to do so. Because the way it's going, the globalists and these international entanglements and free trade agreements are seeking to bring us into a one world government and bring us into a world of uneducated slaves to a rich and powerful elite ruling class. So with that being said, research. I'd encourage you to become a member of the John Birch Society, jbs.org. Read The Creature from Jekyll Island, International Merger, the book To the Myths Goes the Victor and the Monuments by Arthur R. Thompson. And so this is what I wanted to address. And I pray that God would touch your heart and that our nation would return to God and follow him with a whole heart. Thank you.